It is time now for Money Power Politics. New developments in U.S.-China trade talks sent markets soaring this morning. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Secretary Steven Mnuchin spoke with Vice Premier Liu of China. Both parties have agreed they do want to move forward with negotiations. But that is just one of the economic issues that the president is dealing with. The U.S. manufacturing sector contracted, got smaller for the first time in 3 years. And 3 out of 4 economists believe a recession will hit in the next 2 years. Joining me now, my dearest friend, former editor of Bloomberg Businessweek, Meghan Murphy, is here. CNBC contributor and CEO of Ritholtz Wealth Management, Josh Brown, and Politico chief economic correspondent, Ben White, back with me. Meghan, this sounds like good news. The tariff war with China keeps ramping up, but if they sit down and they actually come to a solution, that's a massive win.
Well, look, let's not put the cart ahead of the horse. It's good to hear that there is going to be another meeting to talk about the trade war. Look, what we're finding out is trade wars ain't that easy to win. This has been a year going on. You put up those manufacturing numbers. We see contraction in that sector. That's one alarming sign. It's been sort of balanced out by strong consumer spending still. But when you look at this trade war and the impact it's having, the most important impact it's having is just a total lack of certainty among businesses to plan for the future. It is coming through. We're going to see it impact the consumer more because these levies are going to start facing on things like sports equipment, on clothing, on phones, on mobile phones, and those components coming in. But really, it's just businesses have no certainty, no confidence, are operating in an environment where the policy on China seems to change from tweet to tweet. It's impossible for people to even understand and make the necessary planning. And we're really starting to see it in the sectors where Trump has staked his future on. We're seeing it among farming in particular. We're seeing it again in this manufacturing sector. We see factory output slumping. This is a huge risk for him politically going forward in terms of taking away his greatest asset, which is a strong economy, and actually this self-inflicted trade war wins.
But businesses not spending is not disaster territory. We saw businesses pull back during the end of the Obama administration because they were worried about potential regulation. And when you actually look, unemployment is historically low. Wages are ticking up and consumers are spending. Sam Zell just yesterday said, listen, I get that there's warning signs, but I don't actually see a recession before 2020.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, on the China front, I feel like we live in a yo-yo on this thing. Trade talks are on, trade talks are off. Trump is tweeting, he's not tweeting. Markets are going to go up on the latest, but still not be anywhere different than they were 2 years ago. On the economy, I agree with you that a slight pullback in manufacturing and some less capital expenditures by businesses, not necessarily nightmares for the economy. What I worry about and what we should look at in the jobs report coming out Friday is, are we ratcheting down in the number of jobs, but is the work week getting shorter? The work week got shorter in July. If it gets shorter again in August, that means that employers are increasingly worried about recession coming. They're worried about the impact of the trade war. They're not asking workers to work as much. Usually when we see a shorter work week, the next thing we see are smaller jobs reports. The next thing we see is less consumer spending. If you take that pillar out, manufacturing declining, capex declining, and the consumer declining, that's recession.
Well, the president, while you were speaking, just tweeting that really good jobs numbers are coming. We get that report.
That's the ADP report.
Yes, really good jobs numbers coming. When you look at this and we get a good jobs number, but the president's promise was, I'm going to bring manufacturing jobs back. And we know from the manufacturing number from August, it's contracting. How do you balance the two?
This is the grand irony of the Trump presidency. It was incredible.
There's a lot of grand irony. I mean, like,
that's just going to give us the one.
Yeah, I mean, like, get your pen out.
I'm going to give you the one relative to this discussion, but you're right. When you think about the constituency who has benefited most from the Trump presidency, it's the constituency that would rather be dead than vote for him. It's people with huge stock portfolios.
Would rather be dead than vote for him?
Or
rather be dead than hang out with him?
Or admit to voting for him.
Because those are two different things.
Or
people will quietly vote for him and not put a MAGA hat on.
Fair. Now, just think of this juxtaposition. U.S. farmers, soybean farmers, corn farmers, grain farmers being asked to suffer so that the IP rights of Apple and Microsoft can be protected in Beijing. Just compartmentalize that, and then let me say this other thing. ISM is saying specifically that not just activity, but employment in manufacturing is starting to contract. That frankly is the Trump base. It's farming, it's manufacturing employee, not executive. This is to me the grand irony. So it's not that he's been bad for business or good for business. He's had an incredible impact on the stock market. Who owns stocks? The top 20% of the country owns 85% of the market. Those are not the Trump base. The Trump base are the people that worry about the next paycheck, and rightfully so. They have absolutely not benefited from globalization, from automation, the way that people in the big cities have, specifically the upper end of the income range.
Automation. Meghan Murphy, the one candidate, Andrew Yang, has said over and over, we need to talk about automation. While the president has promised to bring back manufacturing jobs, isn't the issue when those employers have money to spend, they're spending it on technology. That technology is replacing workers.
Here's the thing. You just described it as an irony. I'll go a step further. It's the great con. It is the great con of the Trump presidency that the very constituency that he promised to bolster through increased manufacturing and bringing manufacturing back to America, the farming community. We're talking about states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. These are the people who have been hurt the most by some of these economic policies, in particular the trade war. And on automation specifically, we are still running an incredibly tight labor market. We are seeing wages to pick up, not as fast as people wanted.
And
but you're right,
rates are really low
and are likely to be cut again. So what is so fascinating is who is out there making the honest argument to the people that some of these jobs that are disappearing in manufacturing, we've been talking about this for 4 years, are never coming back, and we need to retrain and reskill. So people out there who are Trump voters have to be realistic about what the future is. They need to reskill. We need to be talking more about obsoleting certain jobs and moving people into training the robots or being the people that build the robots. Those are the jobs of the future. We still are not getting a realistic assessment on this, certainly not from the White House in this ongoing trade dispute with China.
Can I build on that?
Exactly.
It's so important. What she's saying is so important. And I want to just take it a step further. Think about this. These promises.
That's what building on does.
These promises, I will reopen the mines. Is anyone saying that that's got a future beyond just reopening the mines? Of course it doesn't. He talked about deregulation and regulation being this thing that was killing the economy. I don't quite see how. We had the best economy in the world going into the election, but fine.
But the threat of listen, if you talk to a lot of CEOs during the last administration, they would say the regulatory uncertainty had them not
What do you call this? He's saying, I'm going to unilaterally force people to remove their business from China. So look at the industries that he's done the most work on deregulating, and he has done this. Financial and energy. These are the two worst performing sectors in the stock market since probably the tax cut. So
and I'm pretty sure they don't serve Trump's base.
No, but banks, those stocks are moribund. They're awful. Oil and gas stocks shrink as a percentage of the S&P almost every quarter. They're tiny now. Exxon has fallen out of the top 10 U.S. stocks for the first time in recorded history. So he has not benefited with all this deregulation, the constituents in the stock market that he said he would benefit. So I just think there are a lot of ironies to these policies, and they're actually favoring the non-Trump voter.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.